Today, I'm going to talk about 2024 and give out a Car of the Year award. I'm going to do a trio podium to rank the 3 best cars I reviewed in no particular order. Before we get started, let's go over some of the rules. First rule is obviously it's got to be a car that I've reviewed in 2024, a car that's on the channel. It's going to be an all-around evaluation, which is also going to include price and availability. Now, most of the cars that I've checked out are really high-end sports cars, but some are more higher-end and more exclusive than others, so we're going to take that into account. In other words, this is really going to answer the question, what car would I want in my garage from all the cars that I've checked out? And then of course, this is going to be completely subjective and opinionated. This is only my opinion. I'm going to stand on it and defend it. I'm sure there might be a couple hot takes in here. We're going to lay it out with a couple honorable mentions and why they didn't make Car of the Year, and then the top 3 Car of the Year in no particular order. Before we get to that, I do want to wrap up 2024 and just go over the channel. So since starting the channel in June, I've got over 200 subscribers. We've got almost 94,000 views, hoping to hit 100,000 before 2025. We've got a total of 24 videos and 28 shorts and 1,700 hours of watch time. Hopefully in 2025, we can get 5,000 hours of watch time. That's the goal. I want to extend a thank you to all the support and the hate the channel has gotten, all the subscribers. I'm grateful for every single one of you. And hopefully after this, I don't lose any with my hot takes and questionable opinions. But without further ado, here we go. The first honorable mention is going to be the Porsche 911 GT3 RS. So I first checked out this car in Paint to Sample Panama Blue, pictured here, back in June. And it was the first video that I put on the channel. Really seeing this car in the showroom is kind of what was my final inspiration to start the channel in the first place. This is an amazing car. Being up close in person, it really showed how well calibrated and well engineered this machine is. Every body panel, aero piece, every line and detail is thoughtfully engineered to basically have this thing set the best lap time. It's a crazy machine, and it's definitely the most capable Porsche 911 out there today. But there's one critical flaw in this car, which is why it's an honorable mention and not up there on the podium. And that has to do with its pricing and availability. So right off the bat, we'll see the base price on this car is $241,000, which I think that's pretty reasonable. $250,000 for a supercar and a supercar killer to a lot of the other like Lambos and Ferraris out there, because this thing goes around the track incredible. But if you try and get one of these at $241,000, you're gonna get laughed at. You can't just walk into Porsche and say, I want to order one of these, no matter how much money you have. Every dealer only gets a certain allocation of GT and RS cars, and they only give those allocations to the clients they have the longest history with and do the most business with, who buy the most cars. So you really have to have an in order to get one of these and build it the way that you want and in your color. But you could always buy one in the used market, but the only problem with that is then the prices are much higher. Because this car is so good and everybody wants one at that MSRP price, the ones in the used market fetch between $400,000 to $500,000, and special editions going for even more than $500,000. So they are out there, and some people, the unfortunate thing with this car is that some people will take their allocation spec and build it just to not drive it and sit on it so it gains in value, or they'll flip it on the secondary market to make some profit. I mean, I really can't blame you if that's what you're gonna do. I guess, you know, money's the name of the game, but it's just such a shame that this car is so beautiful. It's such an amazing car, and it's kind of being manipulated into making a market and for people to make money, and it's more so treated as like a piece of art than an actual car that's meant to drive on the road. So unfortunately, due to the poor demand management by Porsche, I can't put the GT3 RS on my Car of the Year podium. It's an amazing car, but this one critical flaw just brings it down so much. You can't get one of these. You just can't, as amazing as it is. And if you do, get ready to pay a lot more money than what you'd expect. Another car I of course have to give honorable mention to then is going to be the Spyder RS. So similarly like the GT3 RS, this car has the iconic 4.0 liter flat 6 from Porsche, and with that open top experience, it's going to drive amazingly, but it succumbs to the same issues as the 3RS in the sense that you still cannot get one of these. It's subject to that same allocation. Limited number of buyers are going to be offered this car to spec, and the ones that are probably going to sit on it or maybe even flip it. I've seen a 3RS on the road. I've seen more of the Spyder RSs either in a showroom, in a garage. I have not seen them at any car meets. I've seen a 3RS, a couple 3RSs at some car meets, but I've never seen a Spyder RS on the road. And if you go look, so the base price on this when it came out was $164, which like is really a bargain considering what else like competes with that. That's MSRP. When you go look in the secondary market, these things go for like the $230 to $260 range, one of them even $280. So that MSRP is kind of crap. It doesn't mean anything, especially when it comes to the Porsche special edition cars. And I just think the poor demand management is something that Porsche will have to work on, especially if they want to like be more successful. I mean, I understand they already are successful and there's a reason why this happens. It's because these cars are so good, but in a way, what's going on here makes these cars less good because you have people taking advantage of the market making, and it's just makes it so much harder to get into one of these really good cars, which is why I'm not putting it up there on the podium. So continuing on, another honorable mention, and this one's definitely a hot take, is going to be Lamborghini Aventador SVJ. So without a doubt, this is probably one of the most ballistic cars on the road. The SVJ is like like the poster car, the ultimate supercar. The Aventador, when it first came out, was a poster car on my wall, a dream car of mine. But why does it make honorable mention? So this kind of goes back to the question in the rules page, which is which car do I want in my garage? So this is assuming that you only have one car in your garage. Granted, an SVJ does the supercar stuff and the sports car stuff so good, but I'm not sure if I'd be able to drive this every day, especially where I live. I mean, it rains a lot here, but we probably get about 4 days a year of snow, and I don't know if you could drive this thing in the snow. And it's honestly, with that single clutch transmission, it's a little bit antiquated. It's not going to be smooth around town. It's not at all practical to drive on an everyday basis, but when you open it up, it's amazing. Blows all the cars on this list out of the water. I will give it that, but definitely an honorable mention here. They're not making any more of them as the Ruelto comes in, but it is not my car of the year. And the pricing on this is also in a similar stage as the GT3 RS and the other Porsche RS cars. So when the car came out, MSRP was like $520, and they could be built to over $700K. But in the secondary market, these things go for way more than that. You have an example here at $900K, over $1 million for some of these. And I feel like at over $1 million, you're kind of competing with hypercars. So that's another thing too. At that price point and that exclusivity, like you could go get into a hypercar, where I think this is still a supercar. I did check out one that was in like the $600,000 price range at Lambo Paramus, but that had much higher mileage on it. And I'm sure as these things get up in mileage, you know, maintenance is expensive. This isn't just like, you know, going to your local shop or whatever, having them do an oil change. Like maintenance on these is very expensive, which is why the price will reflect that in ones that have higher mileage. But still an amazing car, just not car of the year for me. And then my last honorable mention, I'm gonna have to go with the BMW M240i and M440i, and honestly the whole BMW M Light line. And now, yes, these are very different compared to the previous two cars that I mentioned that are super high performance. I feel like these are on kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, whereas the Lambo and 3RS, totally performance oriented, not really practical, and not at all attainable, where the M240 is kind of the opposite of that, where there's so much less performance here, but it's completely practical and completely attainable. So you kind of have like the opposite ends of the spectrum here for my honorable mention. Having owned the 240i and having checked out my buddy Matt's M440i on the channel, these cars are quite a bargain. For the money, you're getting a really good amount of performance. I mean, it doesn't compare to those previous two cars that I mentioned, but as far as like an everyday car, it has a lot of performance. It puts a lot of other cars to shame on the road or anything that you might pull up against, and they're reasonably attainable. So the prices on these, BMW did just increase them. So for a 25, you're at 62 for a 440, 64K for an xDrive, and then the 240 is even cheaper at 50K or 52K with xDrive. But really, when you go to the used market, I mean, this is only within 100 miles. There's an abundance of these things available, and I just did the 240, 340, and 440, and these cars range from like high 40s to low 60s, depending on how new they are, how many miles they got, and how they're spec'd. I think the spec really makes a difference on these because there's some options and packages to look out for, especially like the adaptive suspension if you're looking at one of these. But it's a really strong honorable mention because while it doesn't put up the performance numbers of the typical sports cars that I review, it's a really attainable car and it offers you a lot of performance and luxury for the money. Not to mention it's incredibly practical, which is why it's sitting in my garage now. So that's my last honorable mention. Now let's get over to car of the year. My first contender for car of the year is going to be the Mercedes GT63 AMG. So this one's probably a little controversial because I kind of think it's an underrated car. A lot of people really don't think of it, especially because at this price point you can get into things like those Porsches, but this is just a little cheaper and a little bit easier to get. Like you can go into your dealership and order one of these and actually build it the way you want, and you can go to the used market and find them, which is really important. But why especially is this car of the year? And I know I said in my Aston Martin video I was kind of going back and forth on the looks between this and the Vanquish, but after further review, the front of this car looks amazing. The side profile of this car looks amazing. I do think the back of the Vantage and the interior of the Vantage is a little better, but overall this is the best looking car I've reviewed all year, and that's why it's car of the year. I feel like pulling up in this thing, you look like James Bond. Like pulling up anywhere to a restaurant, the grocery store, wherever you're going, you look like James Bond getting out of one of these. The nose is incredibly long, and it's just an elegant and really classy car. So that's why it made this list as car of the year. And it also has much better availability and pricing than the RS and the Lambo that I checked out in the beginning. Now granted, take that with a grain of salt because this car is still very expensive. It's a V8 high-end performance sports car, and it's got all-wheel drive, so there's your practicality. It's gonna start at 180K. So similar price range to a Spider RS, but when you go look at the used market, these cars are cheaper than a Spider RS, and that's because of the demand. This car is more widely produced than the RS cars, and they're also not as demanded because, in my opinion, I think it's a little more underrated. Now granted, those RS and those GT cars, the engines and the handling capabilities of those will not compare to this. I understand that, but my one argument here is this is gonna have all-wheel drive, it looks amazing, and you can actually get one. So that's why it's on my podium. podium. Again, there's no particular order. This isn't like it's in last place. I think the cars I'm about to discuss are all equally important and equally good. And some of these are even cheaper in the lower $100,000 range. So there is some depreciation on these, which is nice. That's kind of a good and a bad thing, because on those RS cars and even the Lambos that I'm talking about, those might go up or even hold their value. Just know if you do buy this car, probably going to expect it to lose value, but that is also beneficial if you're looking to purchase one. So a lot of examples here with a couple thousand miles on it, like under 5K mileage, are in the 130, 140 price range, which is reasonably attainable for a high performance sports car. And this thing puts up really good numbers. I do have to extend an honorable mention, of course, to the Aston Martin Vantage. This car is amazing looking, but after further review, I rewatched both videos, checked out some pictures. I think the lines on the Mercedes are just a little bit more elegant for me, a little bit more classier. I like the headlights on the Mercedes much better. The Aston Martin Vantage, beautiful car, excellent honorable mention. They're very similar cars, very similar engine setup, very similar transmission setup. The interior on the Vantage, of course, is going to be a little bit nicer, and it's going to be more expensive, but overall for me, I'll take the AMG GT over the Vantage. My next car of the year is going to be the Lamborghini Huracan Evo Spider. I feel like the Lamborghini Huracan is my favorite Lambo. I know that's a hot take. I like the V10 much better than the V12. I know the V12 is that ballistic, high-pitched, high-revving sound, but the V10 to me is just so refined and so distinct. Whenever I hear one of these, I don't even have to see it. I know exactly what it is. It's either an R8 or it's a Huracan. That engine sound is so distinct, and unfortunately now the Huracan has been discontinued, so you can't even get one of these new anymore. But when you did, they were fairly reasonable for a Lamborghini supercar, I will say. Granted, still incredibly expensive as far as pricing and availability goes. And as far as practicality, I mean, this one here is the rear-wheel drive convertible. If it was given to me, hell yeah, I'd drive it every day. But the Lambo lineup offers you an all-wheel drive version of this. They offer the Serato, so you really can kind of fit this in as a daily driver in the best world. Depends on what you do, of course, but for my lifestyle, I would make it work. I just like the V10 so much better than the V12. This car is much easier to get along with than the SVJ, more modernized tech inside, and the pricing on this is pretty reasonable. So when this car came out, it was $300K MSRP, which, you know, for a Lamborghini high-end Italian supercar, that's about the price range. You look at the Porsche supercars, you look at Ferraris, that's about what they're asking. But when you go to the used market, you'll find these things, they hold their value a little bit or they decrease in value. After there's some mileage on them, they'll go down in value, and you can scoop these up for below what they initially cost. That's not the case with the Porsche cars. The Porsche cars constantly, even used, go above their value, which makes attainability that much harder. And when this car was being produced, you could go down to the dealership and get one. You probably might have to wait on a small list or wait for the build, but it's not like they're gonna laugh you out of the room. As long as you can write the check, you could get one of these cars. That's not the case with the RS cars. And even some of the Ferraris, I haven't checked out any Ferraris yet, but I know they are much more exclusive, especially when it comes to buying them, just like Porsches. So that's why this car is higher up on the podium for me. It checks that supercar box, it does the sports car stuff really good, adds a hint of practicality over something like an SVJ, and it's decently attainable. Like, you could get your hands on one of these, whereas the Porsche cars are going for above MSRP, they're hard to find on the used market, and you definitely can't get one new. Moving on, I do have to give honorable mention quick to the STO, because that's the ballistic Huracan trim. I did check it out. Just between the two, I feel like the STO compromises the visibility, not gonna be as practical, a little more uncomfortable with those bucket seats. That's why I took the Spider. Even though I'm not a big convertible or soft top person, I'd take that over the STO in a heartbeat. And finally, my all-around car of the year is gonna be the Porsche 911 Targa 4 GTS. So the AMG GT, best looking car for me. Huracan Spider, best sports car for me. The Targa 4 GTS, that is the best Goldilocks car all around. This car, you can kind of do everything. It's definitely dailyable. You have a drop top, it's sporty, all-wheel drive, it's quick and fast, and it's also Porsche, so you have that refined build quality similar to what you'd see on the RS cars, but just not to that level. You're not gonna get the 4-liter flat six. You'll get the 3.8 twin turbo, which is still an amazing engine, and this thing is also reasonably attainable compared to those RS cars, and you still get amazing Porsche quality. So if we go take a look, this car, they don't make it anymore because now the new hybrid is coming out, but when I reviewed it and it was in production, it's MSRP'd at $162,700. But the trend kind of does continue at Porsche because these things go between the $200,000 to $210,000 range, so they are still above MSRP, but they are much cheaper than the GT3 RS and the Spider RS. So they are still decently more attainable, and you would be able to order one of these if the dealer has allocation without prior history of purchasing cars from Porsche. Where if you walk in there wanting a GT or an RS car and you have no prior history, you're not getting the allocation. So I think this is a much more attainable car if you like that Porsche platform, which is why it landed as car of the year for me. That's all I got for today. Stay tuned to see some more cars next year. Thank you for watching.